Howdy and welcome to episode 54 of T-Shirts and Shawls. I'm Karen and today is Thursday, May 10th, 2018. So today I'm going to be skipping both the shirt and the shawl section. The shirt section because I actually wanted to talk about a sweatshirt and I can't find it. I know it's in my closet somewhere, it's just not where it's supposed to be, so I can't find it. But it is something that will go into the what I'm reading and watching section. So I will still talk about what I wanted to say, it'll just be in a different segment. So we're actually going to start talking about what I've been knitting. So last time I talked about my Let Go cardigan and how I made the mistake of not doing the increases for the front of the cardigan, so it would have kind of the points and be a little bit more springy or swingy. But I went ahead and finished off the body, and that's what I'm wearing. So I still need to do the sleeves. So right now it kind of almost looks like a little vest, but definitely needs sleeves on it. But anyway, so I finished the body. I did, see, I don't know how much you can actually see. So there is the bottom of it. And again, you can see it doesn't have that angle like the design called for, but I still am happy with it. So I did the bottom. I learned a completely new bind off for the bottom of the cardigan. The bottom of the cardigan was done in a 2x2 rib. And I've never been happy with bind offs that I've used for 2x2 rib. I finally found a bind off that I really like for most things. That is Lucy's modified conventional bind off. And so it's like it's like the conventional bind off, but there's a modification that's made that helps to make the stitches basically taller, so your bind off is not as tight. Anyway, I do have a tutorial video on my other YouTube channel about that. But on ribbing, I found that modified conventional bind off doesn't quite look as neat. So I was trying to decide what to do, and I researched. Sorry, Eva just jumped up on the table. I researched best bind offs for ribbing, and the tubular bind off is one that was recommended. And I'd never tried it before, but it's one that I know has kind of been on my list of things that I have wanted to try. So I thought, okay, I will give it a try. And to really work the tubular bind off, you need a 1x1 ribbing. So the first thing you have to do is convert your 2x2 to a 1x1. So figured out how to do that. And then you do the tubular bind off. And as I was looking at how to do the tubular bind off, I noticed there were a lot of different ways of doing it. And some of them quite literally created a tube where you would end up with 2 needles and have your stitches kind of alternating on every other needle. And then you would basically graft them together. So you would literally create a tube. And then there was one that is more like a sewn bind off. So you cut, and since this is a pretty long length that I needed to bind off, I had to cut a really long length of yarn and thread it on a tapestry needle and then do basically a sewn type of bind off that was still listed as the tubular bind off. But technically it probably isn't as much since it doesn't create the actual tube like the other method does. Anyway, but I decided to try the sewn version, and that is what I did. And look at this stretch. I mean, it is stretchy, so my ribbing definitely stretches, but it also does not flare, which is always the issue that I've run into. Either it's too tight and your ribbing doesn't stretch, or it's too loose and your ribbing just flares out, and I really don't like that. So this bind off I'm very happy with. I'm glad that I used that. So happy with that I actually did a tutorial video on how to do that. Anyway, so I finished the bottom, and then I needed to pick up stitches all around the front and the neck and the other side. So picking up stitches is something that I don't mind doing. It's not that big of a deal, but when you have to pick up a certain number of stitches or get a certain kind of ratio of stitches that you're picking up, so you can make sure that you're not going to either bunch your fabric together or make it too stretched out. I don't necessarily enjoyed figuring all that out. The pattern did give me a specific number of stitches to pick up. So what I did is I actually counted, so went through and counted along the edge, along one edge, you know, how many stitches I had on the edge that could be picked up. And then I looked at how many stitches I needed to pick up, and then I did math and figured out that I think it was pick up 4 stitches and then skip the 5th one, and then pick up 3 stitches and skip the 4th one. It was some kind of alternating type of thing like that. But anyway, but I figured out, you know, what numbers I needed, and then figured out what numbers I needed on the neckband, and then the same with the other side. And guess what? It worked the first time. I actually ended right where I needed to end for each section, got the numbers right. It was really, really exciting because I was prepared to have to rip out the picked up stitches and try again because maybe I didn't get the numbers right. So that actually worked out really well, which is nice that, you know, something was working out with this project. So really all that is left are the sleeves. And I say all that is left. Sleeves are kind of, you know, I don't really enjoy doing sleeves, but it is something that, you know, if I want this to be a finished project, I have to get over and I have to do them. So I've given myself a little bit of a break. I've allowed myself to put this kind of in timeout for just a little bit, just so that way I can do some other things and then come back to this project when I'm feeling a little bit more excited about it, rather than it being something that I feel like I have to push through. So that is why I probably won't show it again to you guys for a little while, but I will definitely, promising that I will put sleeves on before the fall so I can make sure to wear this. But I'm happy with how it's turned out so far. So other projects that I'm knitting are my boxy. So it's still curling at the bottom. I probably should do a quick blocking just to make sure it's not going to curl so much, but maybe a steam blocking. But I've gotten a little bit more of it done. I should probably measure. I don't think I have a measure. I took out the measuring tape that was in this bag to use for something else. So yeah, of course there's not one in there right now. I think I had about 7 inches last time. So nope, no measuring tape there. Well, so hopefully it's a little bit more than that now. And I'm just continuing to work on that. It's good, you know, knit while I'm reading type of thing. Then I had put aside the socks that I was making from Brazen Stitchery yarn. This is the Molly colorway, so Molly Weasley from Harry Potter. I finished the first sock, so that way you can see what all the colors are like. I think it's been a while since I've shown you this. So there's the first sock. And then I had cast on for the second sock and did the ribbing and then just kind of left it for a while. So I finally picked these up and I'm just a tiny bit beyond the ribbing, but I did do a little bit more on this project this week. So it had been kind of in hibernation mode for a while, but I finally picked it up, doing a little bit more on it. Then I started a new project. So I talked last time about self-striping yarn and the idea of patterns that use self-striping yarn that are not socks. And I had already known about the Geonitrix. I think that's the name of the ebook collection, but it's a collection of patterns by Josh Reichs-Rabinski. I think that's right. His Ravelry handle is Sort of a Knitter. Anyway, so he's got a collection of 7 patterns that are designed, shawl patterns that are designed for self-striping yarn. Actually, I think they're shawl and scarf. So I started one of those. I told you guys about that last time and showed you the yarn, and I'm sure the colors are still going to look, the orange is still going to look way brighter than it really is. But I did start that project. And I am currently in the middle of a short row section, so I can't spread this out because with the short rows, my needles are kind of stuck in that position. So I'll try to show you as much as possible how this has started. And again, the orange is not quite as, it's definitely not a neon type of orange, so hopefully it's showing up decently this time around. But anyway, this is my brand The Blessed, which is one of my newest self-striping colorways, and the orange is Gaheris, And yeah, I think this is definitely something that color-wise I probably wouldn't necessarily pick for myself, but I think it's fun, and I think that it they work together. As far as the pattern, you basically are starting down here and you knit up this way, doing some increases over on this side, and then when you get to the section for the self-striping, you are doing basically in some ways a knitted on border, although you're keeping your stitches live, and knitting going across. You can see how the stripes come out. So you're knitting the orange section this way, and then you turn and knit the self-striping this way, and you're connecting it to the orange section. And then you're doing short rows, and then at the end you end up with a bunch of stitches on this side, and then you turn it back this way and go to the orange section again, and then cast on stitches down here and knit it up going this way to do the striping section, and so on. So you keep kind of turning it like that. It is written for German short rows, which are my favorite short row method. So it's really, really easy. So it maybe sounds a little bit complicated, but it really is not. Once you figure out kind of what the pattern is doing, it's really cool. I think that it's a very inventive design. So I'm really excited to see it. The only, I guess, negative is because it is in garter. When you have color changes in your self-striping, because it is garter, depending on where that color change hits, sometimes that kind of shows up like that, which I don't always love. Actually, I'll just say I really don't love, but that is the nature of garter, and you could probably try to time your color changes so it doesn't do that, but that's probably a little more challenging. So I've just decided to embrace it and not really worry about those color changes. So yeah, so that is the project so far. I don't remember how many sections there are, but like I said, I'm in this short row section. And I think, if I'm looking at it right, I think each of the orange sections gets a little shorter each time, and as you get toward the end. Anyway, so that is a fun project. I have really been enjoying working on that. There are actually a couple of people in my knitting group who are also working on this project, so I think it'll be fun to kind of see all of our projects, and we'll definitely have to get a picture of all of them as we're working on them and finishing them. And then there are others of you I know watching the podcast who are working on some of the other projects in this collection, especially because since they are named, so this is Tsunami, since they are named after weather types of things, we're going ahead and saying that that counts as science, and therefore they are eligible for the quarterly knit along for the podcast. So I think it's Typhoon. I think that's the right one, that a couple of other people are making, and that one is next on my list to make. That one looks really great too, so I'm looking forward to figuring out which self-striping and which solid I'm going to use. Wally's coming over to say hi, and working on that one after I finish this one. Hi, Wally. Anyway, so that is what I'm knitting. I do have a finished project, so I will talk about that next. So I just finished recording the segment on the quarterly knit along, and as I hit end on that segment, I was thinking, hey, I'm doing two projects this quarter. I'm doing the Tsunami shawl, and I'm doing stargazing. And then I realized, wait a second, stargazing. I didn't talk about that in the What I'm Knitting section. So I'm splicing this back into the What I'm Knitting section, but I'm technically recording it a little later. Stargazing I'd put aside because I had taken a picture of it to post on Instagram, and it wasn't in my bag of things I'm knitting, so I actually kind of forgot about it, which I shouldn't because it's gorgeous. So this is my Stargazing shawl. The pattern is by Anna Victoria. The yarn is from Panorama Fiber, and the yarn eventually goes all the way toward a black. Hopefully I will get there. And then got these fun silver lined crystal beads for the main beads, and then in some sections I'm doing a white bead, so you can kind of see some little accents of those. And so this is my current progress. There are 6 charts and I am on chart 4. I'm almost halfway through chart 4. So, so yeah, this is a really fun knit. It is gorgeous. It's all bunched up on the needle right now, so I can't spread it out and really show it to you in all its glory, because yeah, I'm really, really loving this. And that is definitely a fun project to work on. I'm now at the point where it's taking a lot longer to do, you know, each row, since there are more stitches on it, and especially a row with beads, it takes a little bit longer. So I'm trying to make steady progress on this one. But it's one that that depending on how much time I have to knit, I may not get to pick it up, since I actually like to do a pair of rows. So a right side row and a wrong side row at each sitting. And it probably takes me now about 40-45 minutes to do a pair of rows. So now maybe not quite that long. If it's a lot of beads, it does. Anyway, so I'm working on this slow and steady. I should have it finished for the quarterly knit along, I hope. But yeah, I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that, because you guys need to see it. I'm loving this project. So it's nice with sample socks that I only need to knit one, because after I finish one sock, it's a finished project. So this is the brand The Blessed, which is the newest self-striping. So the sample sock is done. And this is the one I talked about last time, where I was using the new needles, which I forgot the name last time, and now I'm forgetting again right now, from Addie. Flexi Flips, that's what they're called, Flexi Flips. So you get the 3 needles that are kind of like double pointed needles, but they have that flexible cord in the middle, so that way you can just use 2 active needles, or 2 needles that the stitches are on, and then 1 working needle. And if you didn't watch the episode last time, I talked more about using these needles. So I did get through the entire sock using these needles. It really did seem like, especially when I was just knitting in the round, that the sock did knit a little bit faster, because I only had to change needles for half the stitches, rather than when I do DPNs, where I have to do it, you know, every quarter of stitches, since I have stitches spread out across 4 DPNs. So I guess it did seem like it was going a little bit faster. I do feel like the tips of the needles are just a little bit too small for my hand. Kind of where it hits as I'm knitting on my hand is just not entirely comfortable. So I did feel my hands kind of tensing up as I was working with them. So that was a little bit of a negative, and depending upon, you know, how you hold your needles and where they hit your hand, that might be something to consider. But overall, I think that I will use them again. Although I think the next sock that I start, I will go back to DPNs, just to kind of give my hands a little bit of a rest. Like I said, it really did start to kind of cramp up a little bit, and I couldn't work on them quite as long as I normally do with DPNs. But anyway, this sock is finished, which means I should probably get the next self-striping colorway that is technically ready. I just need to reskein it. I should go ahead and reskein it so I can get my little sample mini skein, so I can knit the next sample sock. But anyway, it's good to have this one off the needles. So before I talk about what I've been dyeing and a lot of thoughts I've been having about Roundtable Yarns, I do want to tell you something that really horrible that happened to another Yarny. So in Abilene is Yarny's Texas, and apparently last week she lost her studio to a fire. So here is a picture that she posted, and it looks like that's a hallway. And you can see things were just completely destroyed. From what I understand, it looks like she's in like a shared studio type of space, and I think the fire was in another studio, but it was enough to basically destroy everything that she had. So she is trying to raise some money to help rebuild, and so there is a GoFundMe campaign going on to help her be able to rebuild the studio. So I will link to that in the show notes, and if you feel inclined to help out, so that way she can get her studio back up and running at some point, I know that would really be appreciated. So kind of with that news, you know, I've been thinking about Roundtable Yarns having a studio space, and you know, making like pros and cons list, and obviously something like that is a big con. Not that that could not happen at my own home, ooh, knock on wood, but I mean, it is something that is definitely a consideration, especially because having a separate studio space, one of the expenses for that studio space would be insurance. And making sure that if something like that were to happen, then it would be covered. So basically for home, I just have an extra, I guess, clause or whatever you call it in my insurance coverage that covers the inventory and equipment for the business. So it's kind of all in one place. It's still an expense, but I didn't have to get a separate insurance policy. So that's, you know, definitely something to think about. Anyway, but thinking about the studio. So basically I have, even from when I started Roundtable Yarns, I kind of imagined that someday there would be a studio space that I would do some dyeing in. And as kind of as time has progressed, that idea has progressed, and really the vision that I see is to have a space where most of it is the dye studio, where I actually physically do the dyeing, do all of the work for the business. But then there would be a front area that would be like a showroom area. And those of you who are in the DFW area, if you think of like Fiber Lady, where they produce all of the yarn in the back, but then they also have a front showroom space. That's kind of the idea. So that way I would have, you know, yarn set up, and I wouldn't have like regular retail hours, and it wouldn't be like a full-blown yarn shop. It would really just be my yarn. But maybe I would be open like one day a week or by appointment for people to be able to come and see the yarn in person. And then I also thought about, you know, having a either once a month or even possibly once a week, you know, knit night or knit and crochet. I always use the word knit, but I do want to include all of the fiber arts, knit, crochet, spinning, weaving, you know, to have that community type of aspect. So that's kind of the dream, the idea. And I thought, especially after finding out about the Knitting Fairy closing, thinking about having a space for people to come see the yarn in person, and to have space for the community, that kind of pushed me even more toward the idea of, well, maybe it's time. Maybe I should do the studio. But as I've really been thinking more and more about it, as much as I love that dream and I love that vision, I'm just not there yet. I want to be there, but I'm just not there yet. I'm not there yet in terms of expense. I definitely am not having consistent enough sales that would cover rent, internet access, electricity and water, especially if they are not included in the rent, insurance for the space, extra equipment, you know, to set up. If I have more space, and, you know, I would like to get more dye pots so I can do more, so I can, you know, go and have like one big dye day, and one or 2 days each week, and then not have to do dyeing every day, which is kind of where I am now. And so there is definitely a lot of expense tied into it, and I know the business is not ready for that type of commitment. And then me personally, thinking about, am I ready for that type of commitment? I think I mentioned before, I really do like the idea of having the dye pots going, and then also being able to run a load of laundry, or, you know, doing it at home, especially since the school year is fast, the end is fast approaching. Luke is going to be home in the summer, so being able to do work while also being at home with Luke. So a lot of those are the negatives, I think, at this point where I am in the business are outweighing the dream, the positives, the ideas of what that studio space could be. So at this point, I am putting the studio space idea on the back burner. It's still going to be there. It's still something that I definitely dream about. But I know that until I get to the point where I am ready, both financially and just from maybe when Luke gets a little bit older, and I can definitely have days where I am off kind of doing the work, and then being able to come home and maybe not needing my time to be quite as flexible, although I'm sure that probably is never going to truly happen. I really appreciate having that flexible time. So right now, that's the dream. As much as I would like that to happen, like right now, it's just not the time. But that is something that I'm kind of keeping my eye on and potentially aiming toward, possibly. Because there's some other things that I've been realizing about Roundtable Yarns, and some of this realization has just popped up like within the past week, so I am still pretty early on in these thoughts, but I did want to share them with you because I think in working out some of the thoughts, it helps to talk them out and to sometimes get some of your feedback, but definitely to have a little bit of a sounding board. So to give some kind of background set up to this revelation that I had. So I am in my 4th year of Roundtable Yarns, and I started doing it because I was really focused on designing patterns, and I wanted to go to fiber festivals, but the cost and expenses of having a booth were more than selling, $5 patterns really worked with. I would have to sell a lot of patterns just to make back the cost of the booth. And so I thought, well, if I have yarn and I do kits, then I will, then maybe the higher price points of things, then it would be more likely that I would be able to cover the cost of the booth. But really, I'm a designer. And that has changed to now where I'm really much more focused on dyeing and not the designing. If you've watched the podcast, then you've kind of seen that process of that shift happening. Anyway, so that was kind of my original intention. It wasn't to be a huge dye house, basically, and gradually over time, as my focus has shifted toward the dyeing, I have envisioned the studio and all of those types of things, but I think somewhere I got a little off track from what I really want out of Roundtable Yarns. So basically, for the business group that I'm part of, which I've mentioned before, I think, Tara Swiger's Starship program. So each year we go through she calls it Chart Your Stars, where you make your goals for the year, and you think about how you're going to, the big things that you want to do that year, and you break them down into each quarter. You're going to focus on a different thing, and the ideas of what steps you're going to take to fulfill those goals. And along the lines, as I've kind of watched the business growing, a lot of those goals have become more number oriented. So, for example, how many followers are I have on Instagram, or how many people I have subscribed to the mailing list, or the big one, what my sales number is. So how much am I selling? And with focus on the sales goals, so by sales, I'm talking about straight up sales. I'm not talking about the minus expenses and whatever the profit is. So straight up sales, for the first 3 years, I was basically kind of on a very, very sharp upward trend. So I think I'm saying 50% growth, but I think technically it's 150% growth. So basically, and I'm just going to use random numbers for this example. Let's say that the first year I had $2,000 in sales. The next year I did that plus half in sales for the year. So half of 2,000 is 1,000. So add that to 2,000 and 3,000. So year one, I had 2,000 in sales. Year two, I had 3,000. Then the next year I did that again, that 50% addition. So the third year, so now we're at 3,000, so 1,500, 4,500. So I went from 3,000 to 4,500 in sales. And again, these are made up numbers. So 4,500, I should have made up some numbers that math would be a little easier. So the 4,500 divided by 2 is 2,250. Added to 4,500 should be 6,750. So 6,750. I think that's right. We're just going to call it right. So going up from 4,500 to 6,750. And so from year 3 to year 4, that would be kind of, again, if the trajectory kept going, that would be where it would go. But that's you know, the gaps, the jumps are getting bigger and bigger and bigger each year. And I've realized that perhaps that same rate of growth is not necessarily sustainable, especially at my kind of current rate of production and all of that. But I still made that as my goal. So whatever the real number is, I still made that as my goal for this year. That again, trajectory of growth, even though when I looked at that number, I looked at it and I thought, that would be really fantastic, but that feels unreachable. I still said, maybe it'll be a challenge. I will stretch myself and maybe I will surprise myself and be able to actually reach that goal. But that's not happening. Instead, if I'm comparing to last year, I'm actually doing about the same, a little bit better than last year, minus things like last year at the beginning of the year, I started the Tristan and Isolde Yarn Club, which was a 9-month club. So, I mean, that obviously accounted for a big chunk of sales. Whereas this year I haven't had that. I had a yarn club that carried over from the previous year. But I haven't started a new yarn club and gotten that kind of boost of sales. So if I take out the yarn club factor, I'm pretty much doing about this similar to how I did last year, but maybe just a little bit better, which, you know what, is fantastic. And I should be thrilled about that. But because I had it in my head that this number up here is my goal, and even though I'm down here, which is really, really good, I'm feeling kind of terrible. By the way, I want to say this again, not saying this to make any of you guys feel guilty. I just want to be completely honest and upfront about what I've been feeling. So because I have month to month not gotten up to the number that I've calculated that I need to get up to in order to reach that goal, it just, every time I look at the numbers, and I get upset about it. When again, I really shouldn't be upset, because if I didn't have that goal, my numbers are actually pretty good. But because I had that goal, I feel bad. And it's kind of gotten to the point where it is making me feel down enough to the point that I'm dragging my feet on things that I know would actually help raise the number. Example, getting the next yarn club going. I just feel like, what's the point? It's not going, even if that goes well, it's not going to get me to that number. So why am I even doing this? Isn't that horrible? And I realized this weekend, why am I feeling this way? I have no reason to feel that way. Things are actually going pretty well. And it's just because I had this really high number in my head that I knew from the beginning was a huge stretch. But for some reason, because that's been my goal and I have not, there's still a big gap before that goal, it makes me feel bad. And when I think about it, my goal for Roundtable Yarns has never been to make tons of money. That's not why I'm doing this. So why on earth am I focusing on the sales number. Why is that the thing that has become so important? And again, it's because I've made that my goal, and because it's my goal, that's what I should be focused on, which is a hogwash. That's horrible. So we actually had our monthly Q&A for the Starship Tuesday, and so this is what I asked about, and so Tara gave some of her thoughts about it, and I wrote down some notes. I wanted to Siri, open up my email. I made some notes, and I wanted to share some of the things that she mentioned with them, because oh my gosh, some of the things that she said just really hit home and have helped me in thinking about, get rid of this goal. This goal I knew was a stretch goal. It's actually not even an important goal. It's making me miserable. Get rid of it. Let's do some other things. So she said, first of all, she said, a goal is not working when it makes you feel bad. So it's not that it's not whether or not the goal is a success or failure, but the goal is not a good goal if it is making you feel bad. And this goal is making me feel bad. This is not a good goal. And then she said, especially when you're at this point in your business, a lot of times people find that instead of having those very specific goals, the idea is more that you have built up kind of some habits and some things, because like I said, things have been going pretty well. And so I've put in the work to build up the habits and the consistency to have the business be running. And so that's really what I should focus on, doing that consistency. And consistency is something really big for me. So doing this podcast every other Thursday, sending out my newsletter every other Tuesday, doing regular dyeing and updates of the yarn. So that consistency types of thing, that is really what my focus has been on, and that's what I'm doing, and that is what is helping the business move forward. And really, I don't need to necessarily have, especially those number goals. That is really not my focus. And she said, if your goal is a stick that you use to beat yourself up with, again, it's not a good goal. And that is what I've been doing. So I need to let go to that. So she said, don't set a goal, just make a plan. I've got plans. I've got plans set in place. And really, as far as financially, all I need to do is make sure that my sales are higher than my expenses. I would like them to be, a little higher than expenses, but as long as they are higher than expenses and I'm not losing money, that's really, as far as a sales goal, that's the true kind of goal to keep in mind. So I've got plans in place and things that I'm doing that are making that happen. So again, why am I beating myself up with that goal? So, and then this is the thing that she said that just really light bulb moment. So she said, it's kind of like knitters. A lot of people are either a process knitter or a project knitter. And the process knitter is more focused on and excited about the act of doing the thing, the act of knitting itself. And yes, they like to finish things, but it never really, it's really just the knitting itself that is the thing. Whereas the project knitter is somebody who is very project oriented, very much wants to see that finished item. Probably is more of a monogamous knitter, someone who starts and finishes something, and is more excited by that finished item. Enjoys knitting, obviously, or wouldn't do the knitting to begin with, but the real excitement comes at the end when you have the thing that you're doing. Whereas for a process knitter, the real excitement is in the knitting of it and not so much the thing at the end. I'm also, and I am very much a process knitter. I'm also very much a process spinner, to the point that, once I've spun the yarn is done, and I don't knit a lot with my hand spun. That has changed a little bit, but a lot of times the stuff that I knit, yes, I will wear them. I will possibly give them as gifts, but a lot of times I knit it to do the knitting and not necessarily to get the thing at the end. So I am very much a process knitter. And so she explained that it's kind of the same in business. There are people who enjoy kind of the process of the business, the things that you're doing toward the business, versus the person who is very much the project, the product, the goal-oriented type of person who is more focused on the number of sales and all the numbers thing. And when she said that, and I realized, yeah, I'm very much a process knitter, I realized I'm also very much a process business owner. It is the act of running the business, the act of doing things, of sharing the yarn, of coming up with the colors. Yes, obviously I get thrilled whenever somebody wants to buy the yarn, and I wouldn't have a business if nobody bought the yarn. But it's the actual doing the business things that gets me excited. I talked to somebody a while back, and you know, occasionally, I don't want to freak anybody out, but occasionally the thought comes of, what if this isn't working anymore, and what if I need to stop doing round table yarns? Not happening, by the way. That's not in the plans for right now. But what if that happens? And I said, you know, I would find myself, I would take, you know, maybe a couple months off, but then I would feel that itch again, and I would want to do something else, and I would probably start another business. And so realizing that, and kind of putting that all together, and the process versus project, that was a complete light bulb moment for me. And I realized that this year especially, I have focused my goals, or my ideas of what I should be doing, on the things that aren't as important to me. And in doing so, I have made myself feel really bad about the way the business has been going. Whereas if I get rid of those ideas of what I think I should be doing, I'm happy with what's going on. And especially if I don't feel like I need to make, you know, so many tens of thousands of dollars in sales, and therefore I have to make so much yarn in order to have those sales. I've honestly, especially prepping for DFW Fiber Fest, I've gotten to the point where I was going through some burnout. But I've kind of let myself step back a little bit, take a few days off here and there over the past week, and it's feeling a lot better. I'm a lot happier. Kind of rethinking what my goals are for round table yarns. And again, my goal was never to get rich. It was that I feel like I want to do something. I have a desire to do something. But I also want to make sure that it is a flexible something, so I can be home with Luke. And I love doing what I'm doing. I love knitting. I love yarn. I love putting color on yarn. I love, you know, making suggestions, seeing what you guys do with the yarn. That's all the stuff that I love. And like I said, as long as I'm not getting to the point where I'm losing money, because honestly, my husband and I have talked about that, and we can't do that. But as long as I'm at the point where my expense, or my income, the sales number, is still above the expenses, I love what I'm doing. So why am I so concerned about trying to get way up here? Because in my head, that's what either my numbers that I've seen where I think I need to go, or, you know, I've kind of heard other people say, well, by this point in your business, you should be expanding and growing and doing all this other stuff. And you know what? Last year, I really loved where Round Table Yarns was. Very, very happy with it. And if this year is technically very much similar to last year, I should still be loving it. And because I made that stupid lofty goal and focused too much on that, it completely changed my headspace. And I don't know how much you guys have seen of that, if that has been noticeable at all, but in my head it has been a huge difference. So again, this revelation from me, again, you guys might not see much of a change, but it definitely changes a lot of my thoughts, my own internal thoughts, and it has brought the joy back and the stress I'm not going to say stress is completely gone, because any business has an amount of stress, but it's definitely lowered that stress level, because I'm happy where I am if I truly think about where I am. So yeah, so that's a really long conversation, but that is what I've been going through. I'm feeling much more optimistic, much more hopeful, much less burned out, and much less stressed, and all because I made kind of a stupid goal that really didn't matter. So in some ways, kind of maybe also if you're feeling stress in your life, it might be a completely different type of goal. I think occasionally what I've learned through this is also to think about those goals. You know, is this realistic? Is this something that is still working for you? Or is this something that it's become a stick to beat yourself with, and it's really not the goal that you should be having? Whether that be a project that you're working on that just you need to just rip out and find something else for the yarn, whatever that might be. Definitely, I think that these are important life and business lessons, and so that is another reason why I wanted to share it with you guys. But anyway, I'm still working through this, still trying to get my headspace changed, because it's a hard shift to make. But I'm trying to remember, why did I do this to begin with? Again, it wasn't to become rich, because that really wasn't ever probably going to happen. But it also wasn't really to make tons and tons of money. It was to be able to share and experience the joy in the community around knitting. So I'm just going to keep that in mind going forward and make that be my focus. And you know what's crazy? So as soon as I kind of had that revelation this weekend, suddenly I got a little notification on my phone that dings whenever I get a sale. So that way, especially if it is a weekday morning, I can package that up and ship that out that day. As soon as I kind of had these revelations, I got that little ding on my phone that I'd made a sale. And then a few hours later, I got another one. I was like, oh my gosh, it's like the universe is telling me, you know, if you let go of reaching and struggling and stressing, if you just let go, sometimes things are going a lot better than you think they are. So the universe was kind of giving me a little help in getting through some of these thoughts. Anyway, okay, so still thinking through these thoughts, still thinking through these ideas, but I'm definitely in a much better headspace than I was even this time last week. So we have a questions for Karen in the thread on the podcast forum on Ravelry. So if you do have any questions that you want to ask me to have me answer on the podcast, make sure you post over there. Although if you listen to the end of the episode, I have an announcement about questions, basically an upcoming Q&A episode. So this question comes from PTM Smith, Mary. She says, not really sure how to convey what my thought is here, but here goes. I read one of your responses about waiting for your supplier to restock Tristan. I had mentioned on a conversation that Tristan, my sport weight yarn, my supplier is currently out of that, and I cannot order it. So it made me wonder about fiber suppliers and why dyers choose the suppliers they do. For example, does it have to do with how and where the animals are raised and how that affects their coats, or maybe the processing of the fiber and how it's then spun? I would guess cost is part of the equation as well. I've heard answers to parts of these questions, but not all is one cohesive thought, and perhaps it is specific to each dyer. So yes, first of all, it is specific to each dyer, but here are some of the kind of the thoughts behind my own choice of suppliers, and then what I've read from other people supplying. So when I first started dyeing, I got a bag of sample yarn from a friend, and so that came from a particular supplier. And so that is where, because I already had that yarn and I'd already dyed it, that is where I turned first to get yarn that I was dyeing. And some of those, so my original bases that I used were all from that supplier. And currently, the only base that's left from that supplier is Lancelot. Unfortunately, Guinevere and Gawain came from that supplier. And then the long ago discontinued Percival and King Arthur also came from that supplier. So right now I'm only getting Lancelot from that one. But originally I picked it mostly because that is the yarn that I started with. And although I looked at some other suppliers, I just, since I'd already had that person's yarn, I used it. I did look into where their yarn came from, where the wool came from, and that particular supplier uses all US based wool and processes it in the US. So I know that there are definitely dyers that are very much interested, and also buyers who are very much interested in especially those in the US, in a US made product. So that is definitely something that people consider. And that wasn't part of my decision-making factor, but that was a really nice kind of bonus, I guess. But that supplier did not have, like, I really wanted a merino cashmere nylon blend, and that supplier did not have merino cashmere nylon. They are more focused on merino, on mohair, and I think alpaca. Do they have alpaca? Definitely merino and mohair are the big things that supplier focuses on. So they didn't have the base that I really wanted. And so I started looking at some other options. And I will say that at least for the US, there are 3 big suppliers that a lot of dyers use. Actually, I guess my original one, not as many dyers use it, so maybe that wouldn't be considered big. So there are a couple of big suppliers that a lot of dyers use. So I started by looking at those 2. I'll just say that on a business owner's end, we basically get the yarn wholesale, which is less than unless you have a business, you as an individual would be able to buy. And some of these places don't even sell to individuals. They only sell to other businesses. And one of them has, like, twice a year has a retail event where people can buy the yarn. Anyway, so I was looking at these 2, and they have basically what are called minimum opening orders. So you have to spend a certain amount of money. Usually it's around $500 as your opening order. So you have to start out with that. And then each order, afterwards has to be a certain amount. And so I got sample yarns from each of those 2 suppliers, and kind of looking at the samples, looking at the those minimum opening orders, because especially back then I was still early on, and a $500 minimum opening order was a pretty big deal. And in looking at the yarns and their selection, I picked one over the other. And I was really happy with the MCN. That's the Camelot base. Really love that. You guys really love that base too. So I'm glad that I went with that supplier. And since I was already buying from that supplier, when I wanted to expand into other bases, I went with that supplier. Because again, since you have to have the minimum order each time, if I spread out and have like one base with this supplier and one base with this supplier and one base with that supplier, then that does get expensive really quickly, because each time if you're having to spend, maybe after the initial, maybe it's around $300, but maybe I only need like 10 skeins of Lancelot, and I don't want to buy 100 skeins of Lancelot when I only need 10, but because that is the only yarn that I'm getting from that supplier, then that starts to become a little problematic, and tying up a lot of money in inventory. So I kind of went to the supplier that I'm getting the MCN from, and most of my bases now come from that particular supplier. That way I can buy like a little bit of this base and a little bit of this base and a little bit of this base and put it all in one order, and it'll meet that minimum order number that I need. Although at this point I'm way past that minimum order usually on each order. Anyway, so that has a lot to do with it. There are other smaller suppliers that other people use. There is actually, I don't want to show you the yarn because it is something that I'm considering doing as kind of a surprise type of thing. but it's something that my other two suppliers do not offer at all. But I noticed that this other one was offering it, and so I got a little sample of it. So that might be something fun to do for kind of a little one-off type of thing here and there. But I know some people use that particular supplier for a good chunk of their yarn. So there are multiple suppliers, and it depends on your, what your bases are, who you've kind of started with, and maybe you're continuing going with. The nice thing about the first supplier that I was using is they covered shipping. So shipping was free, which was really fantastic. Whereas a supplier where most of my yarn comes from now, I have to pay for shipping, which adds into the cost, which, I guess I was a little spoiled with my first supplier with not paying the shipping. But other factors are supply. So if you have a very smaller company that is supplying your yarn, a lot of times it's not like if you need to buy some yarn and place your order, but that supplier is out and you have to wait. So I've had people, I've seen other dyers say, I'm waiting, 2, 3, 4 months on this supply order. And when you've got festivals and shows coming up, you can't do that. I mean, you cannot wait. That's, 4 months is a huge gap to wait for yarn. So that's one of the reasons I decided to go with some of the bigger suppliers, because most often they are not out of stock, and you can get the yarn. I think now the supplier that I'm using, a lot of dyers use that supplier, and I think that they are not always keeping up with the demand quite as much. They I think it's been over a year now, maybe even longer than that, changed owners. And the owner that was there when I started using them would send out quarterly emails asking for basically your plans for that quarter. What do you think you're going to order this quarter, so they could make their orders based upon what people were planning to order, so they could build their numbers so they would have enough, hopefully, for people and wouldn't run out. And the new owners haven't done that, or if they're doing it, I'm not getting those messages anymore. And I think that might be something that they're not planning as well for. So that might be the reason why some of the yarns have gone out of stock recently. And then just because some patterns have gone viral, and DK weight yarn was all the rage for a while. So a lot of dyers are buying it, and I don't think they were prepared for that demand. But for the most part, they usually have the yarn in stock, and I can place an order and have it 3 to 4 days later, which is great. In fact, I'm getting an order today. Expecting a package today. So that kind of all takes into consideration in some of my thoughts. There are also people who will go to much smaller mills and get kind of custom blends made. And that is something that I think would be really, really interesting to do, but it's not something that I've pursued yet. But there are people that do that. There are definitely people who consider, where especially the wool is coming from. I know, and I don't actually know how to pronounce this. I don't know if it's mulesing, something like that, is a practice that is sometimes done to some sheep because of, I read about it a while back, and I don't really remember exactly what it is, but apparently it's something that people think is not good. Not necessarily inhumane, but not a very good practice. And so they don't want to use wool that has come from sheep that have gone through mulesing. Again, I don't know if that pronunciation is right. But these days, I think that's only done in some areas of Australia, if I remember reading it right. So like my other supplier that I use, the wool they get comes from South America. I think it's from Peru. There are 2 other countries that they've listed as well. And they actually say on their website that this wool comes, especially the merino, comes from animals that have not gone through that. And so that is something that people do take into consideration. Again, for me, it was, a lot of times it was what bases they have available and how consistent they are about having that availability. And for other dyers, some of the other things are important. Because I have a consistent bases, and I don't do lots of changing of my bases, I wanted to have that consistency. There are other dyers who basically dye whatever they can get. And they like that rotation and being able to change things, and so not having to worry about the consistent inventory is probably a big thing for them. Anyway, so those are some of my thoughts about how I kind of went through choosing my suppliers, and some things that other people might consider. So hopefully that answers your question. So, it was the Friday right after I recorded the previous episode. My husband and I went to go see Les Miserables. It's one of the musicals from the Dallas musicals, and we have season tickets this year, so that way we have season tickets next year, so I get to see Hamilton next year. Anyway, so Les Mis was one of the ones that I definitely wanted to see this year because it is one of my favorite musicals, and so I was really excited to go get to see it. And we did see it once before, but it has been many years. I realized that it was 2004 when we saw it last, so it's been a while since we've seen it. So it was good to get to go see it again. We had tickets in the balcony, kind of in the back of the balcony, and but the view was still pretty good, and I don't think that necessarily took away from the show. What did take away from the show, unfortunately, were the late people. So I actually got a phone call that I think the day before that said, showtime is 7:30 and you need to be in your seat at 7:30 because it's going to start promptly at 7:30, and if you are late, you will be held at the doors and you won't be let in until a suitable break in the show. And I think they said something like it was 14 minutes in. So I took that to heart. I know that traffic can be very unpredictable, and you think that you're on time, and then suddenly you hit a patch of traffic and it takes you 30 minutes to go, a mile or two, and now you're suddenly late. So my husband and I decided we would actually eat dinner there. There is like a buffet type of dinner that they do before the shows. It is not cheap, but I thought it would be nice that we could go there, we could have our dinner, we could be parked, we could get a good parking spot, and we would be there in the same building, be able to eat dinner and not feel, rushed through dinner, and then be on time for the show. So that's what we did. So, 7:30 came, we were in our seats, and the show started, and the start was really wonderful, and then I guess it was about 14 minutes in, and they started letting the late arrivals in. And oh my gosh, there were so many late arrivals. So many. And, the ushers are kind of letting in each one, kind of seeing them to their seats. So they've got their flashlights and they're pointing them, at the floor so they don't shine them in people's faces or interrupt the show. But then people started putting on their cell phone flashlights and they're shining them just all over the place. And there are so many people that it takes so long to get each one to their seat that whole period of getting them to their seat lasted, if you're familiar with the show, it basically started in the factory scene where Fantine is confronted by all the workers in the factory. It went all the way through Fantine's I Dreamed a Dream and even beyond that. So here I am in one of my favorite parts, Fantine's I Dreamed a Dream. And I want to get, the emotional buildup of the show. And I can't because there are people walking all over the aisles with, their cell phone flashlights just shining everywhere. So that was really disappointing. And that was, I really did not like that part. But that aside, I did enjoy the musical very much. This is a musical that I've loved since I was in high school, so I'm very, very familiar with it. And there were some wording changes, some things that, at least from the version that I'm familiar with, that were a little bit different. So I have to admit, I did not sing along, but there were a few times where I was mouthing the words along, and I would be, mouthing the words along, and they would be singing different words on the stage. It just happened a few times. Anyway, the actor, and I meant to grab the playbill so I could remember who the actors were, but the actor who played Javert, wow, he was absolutely phenomenal. His voice was amazing, and especially when he sang Stars, it was just wow. And then I thought that the actor who did Marius was also really, really good. Cosette, that actress, her voice was like perfect for Cosette's part. I will admit that Cosette is not my favorite character. I am much more an Eponine person. And if you're not familiar with Les Mis, it's probably throwing out all these character names. It probably means nothing to you, so I apologize. But I'm very much an Eponine person, so never really liked Cosette. But the actress, her voice was perfect for Cosette. I thought there were definitely some standout performances, and then the whole show itself was really good. So we quite enjoyed it. Glad that we got to go, and glad that we at least were in our seats at the beginning. I wish other people were planned a little bit better for that. But anyway, we still enjoyed the show. So in kind of thinking about that, I was thinking about other musicals, kind of my history with musicals, and how some of them I've loved since high school, and some of them I gradually have gotten interested in as the years go by. In college, Rent was the one that I picked up, and then last year I finally listened to Hamilton. And if you've watched the podcast, you know that Hamilton kind of blew my mind. It's amazing. And just this past week, maybe a little over a week ago, I started listening to Dear Evan Hansen. You guys, when people are talking about musicals and how awesome they are, so Hamilton and now with Dear Evan Hansen, I need to pay more attention to that and maybe listen to it a little sooner, because again, Dear Evan Hansen is amazing. I am loving listening and getting to know this musical. I will say I'm probably not as super excited gung-ho about it as Hamilton, but it is a powerful musical. It is a heart-wrenching story. Yeah, I'm sad that I kind of waited this long to listen to it, but at least now I have. And the fun thing is that in 2020, so 2019, next year, the Dallas Musicals is bringing Hamilton and several other musicals that I'm very excited about. And then they've already said that their 2020 lineup is going to include Dear Evan Hansen. So I guess I will be renewing our season tickets so we can see that. But if you're not familiar with this story, it is a hard story because it does deal with suicide. So I will say that, and maybe if that is a trigger warning for somebody, you might not want to listen to the next few minutes, or maybe even the rest of this segment. But basically the setup is that you've got Evan Hansen, who is a high school student, and he has social anxiety and other types of issues, and he has been going to see a therapist, and the therapist is basically having him write letters to himself, like, Dear Evan Hansen, today is going to be a good day because X. And so he's kind of been working on writing a letter to himself, and it's not really necessarily a positive, peppy type of letter like his therapist probably wants him to write. So he's kind of struggling a bit with that. And there's another student in this school named Connor, and Connor is also having a lot of issues. He's very much estranged from his family. You get kind of a little hint of their family dynamic. Breakfast of the first day of school, and he's got a sister, and they just obviously do not get along. His parents don't really seem to know how to help him, what to do with him. Anyway, so he's the other character. And he finds Evan's letter, so letter to himself, Dear Evan Hansen, and basically confronts Evan about it, because in the letter, Evan has actually mentioned Connor's sister, Zoe. Anyway, all that being said, so Connor has the letter that says, "Dear Evan Hansen," and then has the whole letter. And Connor ends his own life. And that letter is found on him. And Connor's parents think that that means that Evan was actually Connor's friend, and that Connor was the one who wrote this letter, and he was writing it to Evan. And so they bring Evan in and want to ask him questions about Connor, and, you know, as a grieving, you know, family, want to kind of know more about potentially what happened. And Evan is kind of, he's not really sure what to do, and one thing leads to another, and he starts to kind of make up this whole friendship that he had with Connor that didn't really exist, but is completely made up, and it gets out of hand. And he kind of is almost adopted by this family, like they take him in. Evan has, his parents are divorced, and he has his mom is working a lot, and so she's not home very much, and so he kind of gravitates toward this other family, and in this fabricated friendship with their son, kind of gets into the family, and really starts to grow as a person, and getting some of the support he needs. There's a lot more that goes on with it. There's a whole love story between Evan and Zoe, Connor's sister. But really what I love about it is just the emotion and the passion kind of behind, especially the music. It is more kind of musical theater, so it's kind of a play that also has songs in it. So if you are just listening to the soundtrack, you miss a lot of the story. So I read a synopsis before I started listening to it, and then after I listened to the music several times, I actually read the play, so I would be able to fill in the gaps and know everything that was happening. Anyway, so it's just really, really powerful emotion. And I actually wrote about it on Facebook, that I was falling in love with it, and one of my friends who for a while lived near New York City, he said that he actually got to see the show last year. So try not to think about how jealous I am, but he got to see it, and he said that it was heart-wrenching and devastating. And I think that word devastating, that is probably a super apt description of the show. So some of the things, and I kind of put some lyrics of the songs, so if I wanted to refer to them, I have them in front of me. Some of them I think are really relatable. So kind of the way that Evan is feeling sometimes. So he has a song that is called "Waving Through a Window," which is what I decided to call this episode. But he says, "On the outside, always looking in. Will I ever be more than I've always been?" And I'm trying hard not to sing it, because I'm tapping on the glass. I'm waving through a window. I try to speak, but nobody can hear. So I wait around for an answer to appear while I'm watching people pass. I'm waving through a window. Can anybody see? Is anybody waving back at me? And it just is like, who hasn't felt that at some point? And some people, especially, I think I've mentioned before, I felt that way a lot, especially when I was in junior high and high school. Kind of wish I had this musical when I was in high school. I think it would have helped a lot. But anyway, so that's, you know, really getting into how Evan is feeling, and so in many ways I can identify with Evan. There's another song called "Disappear," and kind of the chorus in there is, "Nobody deserves to be forgotten, nobody deserves to fade away. No one should come and go, and no one should know that have no one know he was ever even here. No one deserves to disappear." And that just, again, it's just such a powerful message and idea. So I can definitely identify with Evan in a lot of ways. But there are also the two mother characters, so Evan's mother and Connor's mother. And the kind of opening song of the musical is called "Anybody Have a Map?" And it's these two mothers that are basically trying so hard to help their sons, but not knowing what to do to help them. So Evan's mother, is trying to talk to him about, have you been writing those letters? They're really supposed to help you. Maybe you can do this, and maybe you can do that. And he's like, yeah, okay, sure, right, Mom, whatever. And so she says, another stellar conversation for the scrapbook, another stumble as I'm reaching for the right thing to say. I'm kind of coming up empty, can't find my way to you. Does anybody have a map? Anybody maybe know how the hell to do this? I don't know if you can tell, but this is me just pretending to know. So basically the idea of she's trying to be a good mom, trying to help her son, but she has no clue what to do or how to do it. And then we see a little scene in this song of Connor's family at breakfast, and it's very obvious that they're struggling and having issues. And so Connor's mom gets in on the song as well and talks about how she's struggling to figure out what to do. And I gotta say, as a mom, fortunately not at the teenage years yet, but even at 6, there are some things that, some challenges that we've been faced against that I have no idea if what I'm doing and how to best kind of get through some of these things. Those of you who are parents, it's hard to be a parent and to know whether or not you are making the right choices and doing the right things. And oh my gosh, yes, having a map, phew, that would be so wonderful. But fortunately, there really isn't one. But anyway, so the mothers, their story and what they're going through in this musical, I also very much identify with as well. So I'm, I have been pretty much listening to this music nonstop. Have been listening to Hamilton a little bit still too, but pretty much been just having this on repeat and listening to it, and it really is powerful and heart-wrenching and devastating, but also at the same time, oh gosh, I had the word in my head and I completely, cathartic. Also cathartic. It really helps to bring up some of the emotions and to also help kind of think through them and work through them. Who knows, maybe that's why I had the Round Table Yarns revelation about the goals. But that's kind of what has been going on, what I've been thinking about a lot over the past week and a half or so. So if you have not tried Dear Evan Hansen, again, you probably want to read a synopsis first so you kind of know what the story is. But definitely give it a try. I'm really, really loving it. So just a quick update about this quarter's knit along. So remember, it is any shawl that is inspired by, based upon any science or math related idea, and we are being pretty flexible about that. That is the theme. We are almost at the midpoint of this quarter, so it started at the beginning of April and it ends at the end of June. So we're almost at the halfway point. Make sure that you are posting in the chat thread, and then when you finish your shawl, post in the FO thread. And I didn't grab the prize yarns, but last episode I showed you guys, I think it was the last episode, I showed you guys what the prize yarn is going to be. There are 2 prizes this time around. One gradient sock blank, and the other is that Veil Nebula gorgeous colorway from Elemental Fiberworks. The sock blank comes from Panorama Fiber Arts. So both really fabulous prizes. So I hope that you will be participating in this quarter's knit along and possibly win one of those prizes. So as crazy as it may seem, this podcast is coming up on its 2-year anniversary. I cannot believe that. But yeah, 2 years ago, almost, I looked at the date and then forgot to write it down. I'm pretty sure it was May 26th, which was the very first episode came out. So May 26th, 2016. And so the next episode I record will be very close to that May 26th date. So I thought that I would do a special Q&A episode. And I would love to get some questions from you guys. So what I'm going to do, and there's also going to be a giveaway involved as well. What I'm going to do is start a thread on the Ravelry forum, a separate thread. So there's the ongoing questions for Karen thread, which you can always post to, but I'm going to do a separate one specifically for this anniversary Q&A episode. So if you go to that thread, and you can post a question if you have one. If you don't have a question, you can post a comment. You can post something, one of your favorite moments of the podcast, or something you really enjoy about the podcast. But if you have a question, that would be great, so that way I can have some things to answer for the next episode. And one post per person as far as entry into the giveaway. And then I will do a random number generator, and I don't have all the prizes collected yet, but I will collect some prizes. There will probably be, I've got at least 4 things in my head that that can work as prizes. So at least 4 prizes, possibly more, that I will be doing as a giveaway. And I think last year when I did the anniversary thing, I had a lot of prizes as a giveaway, and I said that you could win more than 1 prize. So we'll see. I think if I have 4, I would probably want to spread that out and have 4 winners. But if I get like a dozen prizes, if I'm making a super lofty goal, I might do the, you could possibly win more than 1 prize. We'll kind of see. I will get the prizes together and let you guys know how many there will be. Anyway, point is, please go over to the Ravelry forum for the podcast. There will be a thread that is there for you to post your question, hopefully question. If you don't have a question, then post a comment. You'll be entered into the giveaway, and I will be answering the questions on the next episode. The next episode, I'm actually going to record it a day early because normally I would be recording on May 24th, the 2 weeks from today, Thursday, but May 23rd is Luke's last day of school. They're getting out pretty early this year. So the 24th will be his first day off from school, and it's always hard to record a podcast when Luke is home. I'm going to have to think about what to do over the summer. It is always hard to record a podcast when Luke is home. And I think especially the first day that he's home after the school year, I probably don't want to, set him aside and then try to record the podcast. So my plan is to record the podcast on Wednesday, May 23rd, during Luke's last day of school. And I might not release it until the 24th. I might release it on the Wednesday, but I'm going to record it that day. So that means the deadline for posting your question and for entering the giveaway will basically be midnight on Tuesday, May 22nd. In case you're wondering, I have a calendar off on the wall over here, which is why I keep looking over there. So Tuesday, May 22nd, by the end of that day is the deadline to post your question or comment for the giveaway, and then I will be recording on that Wednesday and releasing it either later Wednesday or on Thursday, the 24th. And you'll watch the episode and find out if you win. I will actually draw the winners on the episode. So I hope you come up with some good questions. So I have a surprise new co-host that may be popping up from time to time. This is also another factor for why I'm not going to be moving to a studio space anytime soon. I'm definitely going to be needing to stay home. We got a doggy. This is Luna. Luna, the camera's over here. Can you say hi? So Luna is a Boston Terrier, and she is 8 weeks old. We just picked her up yesterday. So she is brand new to our family and getting used to us, getting used to the cats. The cats are getting used to her. And so we will be spending more time at home, getting her trained and getting her adjusted to our family. So yet another reason why working from home is really, really nice, to be able to do this. So Luna is from Harry Potter, so our little Luna Lovegood. So she is definitely fitting right in. She is a ball of energy when she is very energetic, and then she definitely crashes hard and she sleeps. We are probably now at the 24-hour mark with her, so it really is very brand new. But we picked her out a while back, so we've known about Luna and we've been planning for her for a while. Yeah, she's giving kisses. The cats so far don't really know what to make of her. She thinks the cats are great fun, and her favorite pastime so far has been chasing the cats. So she chases after them on her little legs, and the cats just go running. The cats are kind of being a bit fraidy cats. We are making sure that we are paying a lot of attention to the cats, and they're not, you know, not feeling left out. But I wanted to show Luna off to you guys, and so now, along with Wally and Eva, she will probably be popping up on the podcast here and there as well. And I may do more, like on Instagram, on the stories, I may do more with the cats and with Luna, especially with the summer, and probably with Luke too, with the summer coming up. So if you want to kind of see more of them, follow me on Instagram, Karen.knits, and I'll probably post there. So, bye Luna! Thank you so much for watching this episode, especially for listening to my thoughts about Roundtable Yarns and setting goals and everything. I definitely would love to hear your feedback. You can either post in the thread on the Ravelry forum for this episode, or you can post a comment right here on YouTube. Assuming you're watching on YouTube, I also upload this to iTunes. I don't know how many people watch through iTunes. So either comment on YouTube or on the Ravelry group or on both. And we'll get a little bit of discussion going, I hope, and love to hear your thoughts about the episode. Again, thank you so very much for watching. Until next time, happy knitting!